Hey, and welcome to Parents Canada Talk Radio. It's Jason Thompson. I was literally just sitting here watching the booth and watching that, go, go, go. And I thought it's always on a certain beat, and it wasn't on the same beat this week. You freaked me out. Thank you so much. Welcome to the show, everybody. We're going to freak out a whole lot this week. We're talking about emotion. In fact, it's going to be a very emotional day today, literally, because we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. We're going to talk about self-regulation. First thing I learned this week, self-regulation. Totally different than self-control. Now, I'm not the only one sitting here in the booth today. I've got somebody who can kind of share things, and it's her first time on radio, and she always does all the great work for Parents Canada social media. Wherever you are, I want you to start clapping in your car or in your life for Amy Warrell. Amy, hi.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm a newbie.
You must be. You spent over an hour in the car to get here. So that's a big, that is, again, totally a parent moment where
Committed.
we never think, my hips are still killing me this week from driving the kids around to, this is what happens when you get old. So, Amy, why don't we start by talking about you?
Yeah.
Tell us, I kind of have three questions, which are, who the heck are you? And why are you here? Yep. And what mom street cred do you bring to the table? So I want to start with who you are. Introduce yourself.
My name is Amy Warrell. I currently live in Durham, so I'm on the other side in the burbs with my family. We are a family of four. What gives me street cred? Mom street cred. I have two kids. One is 7. His name is Shane, and I have a daughter named Aria. She is 6. I had my children 15 months apart. Yes, I did it on purpose. I get a lot of, are you crazy? Did you do that on purpose? And we actually really wanted our kids to be close in age.
So, how's that working out?
You know what? I got to tell you, I feel like I'm in the favorite stage right now as far as parenting goes. When I had 2 under 2, it was wild. Like it was, I say like I was in the weeds. It was just like I felt like, when am I going to sleep again? But now, at 6 and 7, they both still really love me. They love to cuddle. They still hold my hand. I don't embarrass them yet. And everybody in the house can wipe their own butt. I feel like we're at this amazing, amazing place.
As a parental checklist, that's a pretty good one.
It really is, right? So I feel like now things are super awesome. A little bit more about me. I've been working kind of in the digital space for 10 years. I literally fell into it. I think as people did 10 years ago, I don't think you couldn't go to college for social media. Like that wasn't something that you were learning 10 years ago.
Right.
My blog started as a wedding website. And I initially thought, what should we call it? Amy and Sean's Wedding? And my husband looked at me like I was totally lame. And so we ended up calling it Milk and Cocoa. I am the milk. He is the cocoa, if you can get that.
That's lovely.
And when we were married, I didn't want to let it go. So we kept it, and we've just, it obviously has evolved as our lives have evolved. And I've worked kind of on the agency side, and I continue to keep up our business. So, yeah.
Let me ask you about back with the kids and things like that.
Yeah.
I remember on the first show I talked a little bit about my philosophy and approach to parenting.
Yeah.
I have kind of one litmus test. Tell me a little bit about yours. What is your approach? What does success look like for you as a parent?
I think that success is different daily for us. I think that ideally, I would like to say that I let them try to figure it out for themselves.
Right.
I think if you were to ask my husband, he might slightly disagree with that and say I'm more hands-on than others.
But what does that mean?
Yeah.
Do you ever say that to him? Yeah, but what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Or are you busy yelling at each other at that moment?
No, not so much. I think parenting is different every day. And every day I think, oh man, I didn't think I was going to be dealing with this yet. I feel like I've said that a lot lately, to be honest with you. Like, oh man, am I really dealing with this right now? Is this a thing that we have to talk about? And that being everything from, cannabis to, because these are things we talk about with our 6 and 7-year-olds because it's out there and it's all over the news and whatever, or like the sex talk or all of these things. And I think, when I became a parent 7 years ago, I knew I'd have to talk about it.
I'm curious, just from a cannabis perspective, how are you approaching that?
Completely open and completely honest with my children. The very same, quite frankly, that I've talked to my children about alcohol. They know that mom drinks wine or has a beer.
What?
So like, oh my gosh, can you believe it? So quite frankly, the very same. It is legal. I don't ever want my children, like I'm not a freaker outer, right? Like we've always been the family that has used the proper names for everything. Whether that be alcohol, cannabis, private parts. We really are quite frank with our children because kids are smart. Like, we need to give them credit.
I'm with you. Listen, one of my kids last week in the car, he was playing this thing. He had gotten like GarageBand and kind of remixed a song by NF, and it was like really great. But it was the word drugs every 5 seconds, and so we had this frank talk about drugs, and this is what I said to them. I said, what do you guys think about drugs? And of course, they parrot the line that they get in school, right? And I'm like, look, I'm going to be blunt with you guys. Drugs are awesome.
Yeah.
They're also horrible.
Right.
And we kind of showed both sides. Why would people kind of invest in this? And why is it actually a problem? Right? And we actually went down the path on a couple things. I said, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
You know, I personally don't have a ton of experience. I have a ton of experience with bourbon. But, you know, that sort of stuff. And it's helpful because I think once you do that kind of black and white sort of thing to the kids, they're going to pick one side. And someday, somewhere, they're going to go, wait, there's another side here, right? And if you kind of give them that to begin with, they can at least make an informed and educated decision.
Yeah, I think it's just being honest, right? Like, I don't ever want, I want my kids to be able to come to me with questions, not be like, ooh, remember how mom acted when you know, I asked about X, Y, or Z, so they won't come to you, right?
Right.
And I mean, specifically with cannabis, it was all over the news for a while. So the kids, you know, they ask.
Questions.
So you say, hey. So I mean, way back to your initial question, I would say that my parenting style is pretty open and honest because I want them to come to me. Like, I want them to not be scared when they are 14, 15, and they have questions.
And I think this gives us a good foundation for the conversation we want to have today, which is this idea of self-regulation. You know, emotion is, to me, it's an emerging part. It happens to be my weird hobby, which is emotional intelligence. And it really is something that you're hearing a whole lot talked about. You know, my daughter, she's in first year high school. This year she was going to a new high school in a new board where she didn't have really a strong kind of social segment. And when it was first pitched to her, like 9 months ago, we'll have you live a little more full-time with mom, and you'll go to high school there. And it was immediate flag, right? But we knew it was a better place for her to be over the long term. But of course, it creates instantly like fear and anxiety and all that sort of stuff. And it was like instantly I think it's the Winston Churchill quote came to mind, which is the idea is the only way around it is through it.
Okay.
And so, you know, you say to them, look, I see your fear, I hear your anxiety and this sort of stuff. I'll give you the reasons that I think you should go. But really, I spent my time focusing on the emotional side because saying, you know, I can't solve this for you. I can't take away the fear, but I can help you understand what the fear looks like so that you can identify it and work with it. It's really interesting. Our guest today, I actually talked with him for a little while, and he said, you know, from an emotional perspective, we kind of have four emotions that we talk about a lot, right? Happy, sad, angry, scared, right? 3 of those 4 emotions are not positive emotions.
Right.
Yet, what is our litmus test? We want everybody to be happy all the time, but if 75% of the things that you experience are not necessarily happy things, you got to be able to have the skills to do this, which brings us into this idea of self-regulation. You want to unpack this for us a little bit?
Well, yeah. So I think a lot of people, probably us included, are confusing or meshing the two, right? We think that they are actually the same thing.
Self-regulation versus self-control. Right?
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, self-regulation, by definition, is about helping your children deal with their own emotions, right? Giving them the tools to actually deal with it. Whereas control, it's totally different, and maybe
it's like shutting the thing down in the first place, right?
Right, exactly.
I guess the difference for an adult is the self-control is, I shouldn't have that donut. I'm not going to eat that donut. So self-regulation is, okay, what are the feelings that kind of get espoused as a result of wanting to have that donut? Yeah,
and I think it's important to be able to give our kids the tools to be able to self-regulate, whatever that looks like. And you brought up a great point about, you know, 3 of the emotions being kind of negative. Yesterday, I looked at a note home from the teacher, and it was saying, tomorrow's Halloween, no masks. No masks, no weapons. I get the no weapons, no masks. And I also get the no masks. But guess what? My kid's costume has a mask. And I don't know that you'll know what he is without the mask. So he was really...
Are you allowed to reveal it? What is it?
Oh, he's a... For anyone who plays Xbox, he's being a Halo... Yeah, the Halo guy.
Master Chief.
Master Chief. Thank you very much. So he's got this... Listen, the mask is awesome. And the outfit is just muscles. Like, it's just one of those things with the muscles in it. You know what I mean? So, and quite frankly, any costume with muscles, he would have been thrilled. So we went for the Master Chief. But then he was upset, like really, and went from angry to sad quite quickly. Like, they're not going to know what I am. So I said to him, okay, but these are unfortunately the rules, or fortunately for, we don't want you banging into walls at school. So what can we do about it? What do you think is the best thing to do about it? And him and his sister talked. Thank goodness that they are, they can ping things off of each other. And he said, well, I think maybe if you can get me some face paint, maybe I can just tell people I'm in the Army. So great. So today, the day before Halloween, I will be picking up some face paint. But he was able to kind of process that. Yeah, he was angry, then tears, but was like, okay. So I don't have any choice because I'm not going out. He knows his mom isn't going to buy another costume. So what is he going to do to figure that out? And he came up with the idea of face paint.
I love
that's
that.
Great.
And you validated the emotions, which is, something, there's a number of perspectives and approaches that says, how do you build that healthy emotional intelligence? There's actually an article in the Washington Post last week that talks about this book called Permission to Feel. And I really, really like that. And as you were telling your story, it kind of triggered all of those sorts of things. The first thing, they have kind of a little back of the envelope approach called RULER. They've got their initialism or sort of their acronym that they can use. And the first one is that idea of recognizing what emotion is happening within you. And it's interesting to me because a lot of the stuff that I've been listening to on the Knowledge Project podcast and other places are the first places, if you want to diffuse a situation, is get the person to kind of say, what are you feeling right now? Mm-hmm. And when they can recognize that. And in the one of the podcasts that I listened to recently, it was really interesting because, they asked the person, what are you feeling right now as we're having these conversations? And the person says, well, I feel like you might be judging me. And the guy says, hang on a second. That's not a feeling. That's how that is you saying the word feel, but a feeling is happy, sad, angry, happy.
Right.
Start there with the base emotion, because if you can, the line is, if you can name it, you can tame it. I love that line. And I think that was in this article as well from the Washington Post. But that whole kind of rule, and I've just, I was so impressed by the article that I'm starting to read this Permission to Feel book, which is by Mark Brackett. So it's a really interesting approach that says, for the last half decade, we have spent a lot of time saying, hey, be happy all the time. And if you've got bad emotions, squish them down, forget about them. And the thing is hey, hang on a second. We have bad emotions. We have to understand how to deal with them. And if dealing with them is avoiding them, that's not going to help anybody in the end, which I think is a really, really important message when it comes to self-regulation. If we're telling people have only self-control and never feel that way, then you're basically denying your base humanity. And as an adult, you're going to spend a whole lot of time in therapy trying to figure out why you can't deal with these anger issues or sadness issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this week specifically, it's Halloween week. And for kids, it is every probably emotion that you could have, right? Like schools have theme days and then they have parties and there are all of these things. And kids' level of excitement is totally different than ours. So I think that we need to kind of say, okay, put ourselves in their shoes a little bit. Why are they feeling this way? Why are the emotions so roller coastery? Well, sugar and all of the things. But I think this is a great week to kind of
that's a good point.
Look at these things, right? Like how can we regulate and maybe not control our kids when things are.
Not control our kids. I think that's a great line to have. And it's a good segue to break. We're going to come back after this with Dr. Daniel Chorney, who I had a lovely conversation with yesterday as he was changing planes between Toronto and Halifax. And he works a lot with kids and with families to be able to help them understand where the role of self-regulation is. We're going to come back and talk about that in just a second. In the meantime, you got questions? You got kids who, they're throwing tantrums. You're not able to deal with their emotions as tweens and teens and things like that. We want to hear from you. You can reach us at at Parents Canada. That is online. We're on all the good social media platforms, as you know, Amy.
Yeah.
You can also reach us at 416-640-0200. We're going to be back in just a couple minutes on Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960. Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio. I'm Jason Thompson, and I am with
Amy Warrell.
And you know what? First segment, you rocked it.
Thank you.
You're a pro at this now. Okay. All right. We are talking about self-regulation, different than self-control. Difference being self-control, that whole idea of suppressing the thing. Self-regulation is seeing the emotional side and learning how to deal with it, which is something, you hear the phrases, helicopter parents, lawnmower parents, snowplow parents, good Canadian phrase,
Louise.
that they try and take away that level of disappointment. So our guest today is going to help us out here. So why don't you intro our guest?
Yeah, we're super excited to have Dr. Daniel Chorney with us. So Dr. Daniel Chorney works with children, adolescents, and young adults with a variety of mental health concerns, but he focuses on anxiety, depression, and insomnia. His training includes extensive work in helping young children, for example, preschool-aged children, overcome their fears of social situations and other specific situations. For example, fear of sleeping alone. I mean, I think we've all probably had a kid in our bed at one point in time. Separation anxiety, facing new situations, public speaking, needles and injections, etc. Dr. Chorney also has a particular interest in treating pediatric obsessive compulsive disorder and habit disorders. So lots of things. So welcome, Dr. Daniel Chorney. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
This is an exciting and interesting topic, and let's start kind of at the wide end of the iceberg here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, in your practice, in your life, in your experience, what sorts of challenges are parents bringing to you that kind of bring up this whole idea of self-regulation?
Yeah, I was listening actually to the show before you called, and I think the examples even you two gave are just like any other parents who come in and sort of say, my child or teen is going off to a new school or going off to university, or like you just said, Amy, trying to sleep at night and is scared. Those are really common kind of scenarios, and you both gave great approaches for how you're handling it, by the way.
Thank you so much. I'm probably crying now.
What we see today is fear and anxiety, and how to help kids regulate their anxiety when they're put in tough social or academic kind of situations.
Do you see, you use the word anxiety. We hear that a lot kind of in the zeitgeist in the world around us. Do you see a real increase in anxiety, or is it just a real increase in awareness around anxiety?
Yeah, so that's a really common and complicated question, which I get asked a lot. The data that we're looking at isn't showing a specific rise in the rates of diagnosable clinical anxiety disorders. So that's a very specific technical term. But we are seeing people report higher rates of subjective levels of distress. Or in other words, they're having a harder time coping with stress and just sort of we would call it self-reported anxiety, feeling anxious, but that's very different from being clinically impaired.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about when you hear these sorts of things, what kind of strategies are you counseling parents to kind of share with their kids so that they can deal with that?
Yeah, and again, this is where I was saying both of you provided really great approaches to how to handle it, whether it was the Halloween costume and feeling disappointed. I remember as a kid, growing up in Vancouver, we would always have to cover our Halloween costumes in raincoats.
Yeah.
And feeling really bummed out that no one could see, how cool my costume was.
Mm-hmm.
But just like you handled it, it's sort of normalizing that emotion and saying, yeah, you know what, I'd be frustrated too, but let's focus on a solution that's best for everyone rather than just giving up. So when people ask me about strategies, you've already kind of jumped ahead a bit, because it's really about helping that child be more aware of how they're feeling, and then providing or giving them some scaffolding so that they can figure out independently, depending on their age, what are my options here? What are some good choices? What are some obvious bad choices? What are some choices in between? And can we come up with some sort of strategy together that helps that child out the best way possible? Not just giving up or shutting down like we see some kids do.
The giving up thing's kind of interesting to me. I had this conversation in the car this morning. One of the kids is doing, she's at high school. She's doing okay, but I know that she's the sort of person who gives up before she actually moves forward. And we had this talk. It's a weird thing to talk about with a 13-year-old about growth mindset, right? But the idea of, if you tell yourself you can't do it, then you won't do it. And then I said, you might want to take a more open approach to things, because what ends up happening is at least you try and find the strategies that help you get forward. But you try not to kind of layer, like give them the full roadmap. You tried to hope that maybe they'll take that as kind of the catalyst to get there. That's a weird thing as a parent. Like, where does interceding help as opposed to you doing it for them?
Yeah, that's another great example too, where you can sort of talk to a teen, I guess, about, look, here are your choices. You can decide, you use that Winston Churchill quote, which is a nice one earlier too. You can decide to do this even though it's going to be challenging and take a risk, but also potentially reap the reward if you come through the other end. You can also make a choice to not do it, but the downside of that choice is that there won't be a reward. There won't be that good feeling at the end that comes with success. So often I joke about these media kind of things because I get anxious before talking. I don't want to sound dumb. And I can very easily just refuse. I can say I'm not interested in doing that. But if it goes well, I feel great. If it goes bad, I have to live with that and move on. So there's always sort of walking that balance between those two choices.
Wow, it's a really good example, and a good thing, I think, to share with kids that, hey, listen, even as adults, we get anxious. We have all of these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, how do you feel like parents can enable accountability with their children?
Accountability for making choices? Or
yeah, with the choices, like say to them, hey, listen, you own your emotions. Mm-hmm. You're going to need to solve this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first part is just setting up that baseline and saying that at some point, kids have to learn to deal with the consequences of the choices they make, and that it's okay for them to make mistakes, and that's going to feel uncomfortable afterwards, but that uncomfortable or distressing feeling is a normal human kind of emotion. A lot of times, examples that some parents might think are benign, like maybe a child is too shy to order an ice cream cone.
Right.
And so a parent will say, oh, don't worry about it. I'll just order it for you. Well, one time is fine, 2 times is fine, but over a course of 5-10 years, you can see a teenager who is too shy to order themselves an ice cream cone or something like that treat, and a parent will just do it for them, where we might say, you know what, you have a choice to make today. We've talked about this. We've practiced this at home. We've talked about your thoughts and feelings. You can choose to order that and get the reward, or you can make the choice to not order it and not get the reward. It's a nice, simple sort of example of things parents can be starting early to help their kids understand there's consequences to their actions and make them accountable.
Right, and I guess that's where modeling comes in also as for parents, right? Like what kind of behaviors are we modeling for our children? I mean, I have had several conversations with my children lately because, they're getting older and they get disappointed and they get angry. And we have conversations saying, mom isn't happy all the time. And sometimes things don't work out, whether it be something at work or, if I had not a great workout or, and even seeing my husband and I get into disagreements, right? It's important to show them that things aren't always perfect. Mom isn't always happy, and this is how we kind of work through our emotions. So hopefully they will then take those tools into their little tool belt and do the same.
Yeah, the power of modeling is huge. Parents, like most of us, I think, know, create that sort of template very early on for kids as this is how the world kind of works. I look to my parents. I spend a huge amount of time with them. I'm often telling parents, because sometimes they'll tell me they're embarrassed that they yelled at their kid or they wish they were less angry. And we'll talk about it's pretty normal to match someone else's intensity. If I have a 7-year-old screaming at me for half an hour, it's pretty understandable that you might raise your voice back. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that later you can't go back and talk about, my message was correct, but I didn't have to yell it. And talk about the feeling you had was fine, but there are better ways to deal with those feelings.
Yeah, I did this recently. There was a period a couple of years ago where I felt like I was under an extreme amount of stress, and I don't think I was the friendliest person to be around. And I talked to my kids about this. I said, this is who I was, and tried to kind of walk that back from a modeling perspective, but also to say I'm accountable for that behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was having a terrible day in the past week, and knew that I was on the last straw that I probably had, and I said to both my children, "Mom's not having a good day. This is what I need from you in order for for things to go smoothly." And I was quite honest with them. I said, "I have called your dad. He's coming home early from work to take over," and they were then like, "Oh, okay, she's figuring out what she needs to do to make it through the rest of this day." Because some days are just not the best days, and that's okay, right? I think sheltering our kids from that makes them, when they are not having a good day, them think that they're probably failing because things aren't going the way they think they should.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a really easy analogy for emotional self-regulation that kids, really young kids even, can understand is just using a stoplight analogy. So red, yellow, and green. And so I often will joke with little kids, what do your parents do when they see a red light? They stop. A yellow light, they slow down. A green light, they go. And you can put that analogy onto any emotion, like Jason said, happy, sad, mad, or scared. And if kids have a hard time with their emotions, you can use it for things like hunger or how bad they have to go to the bathroom, something more concrete that they might understand.
Yeah.
And then we just talk about, and you can apply this, I often joke, even with adults in relationships as well. You can come home and say, "I'm feeling a bit red zone. It looks like you're getting a bit red zone as well. Why don't we take 30 minutes to do our own thing, and let's rejoin this conversation when we're both back in the yellow."
Love that.
The two red zones going at each other will almost guarantee you're going to say or do something you regret, which is exactly what regulation is about.
That's, I think you just gave me advice for my future relationships. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
That's a great tool.
We are going to head to a break, Dr. Chorney, and I know you're going to hang around with us to actually walk through some scenarios, some real-time things. Kids who suffer from anxiety and ADHD, kids who are in university and things like that. What can parents actually do? So we're going to come back to you in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. We are on at Parents Canada. You can also reach us at 416-640-0200 if you got questions about how to deal with kids that are struggling through some of the self-regulation. We've got somebody on the line who can help you out. In the meantime, you are listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio, and we are on News Talk Saga 960. Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio. Amy, how's your experience going so far?
So far, so awesome.
Yeah? You learned it? Hey, I use that exact same line. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What do you know?
I mean, it's better than great.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
We have Dr. Chorney on the line. Thank you so much for the insight that you've been giving us so far. We thought we might lob a couple of scenarios at you. And the first one that I was really kind of the last segment that I wanted to have in the last question in the last segment, which is, it's easy to say self-regulation, but we're experiencing increases in things like anxiety and ADHD. And in fact, literally as I'm talking about this, a friend of mine texted me and said, consequences and rewards, they don't work when you're dealing with kids who suffer from anxiety. So how do you respond to that? How do you help kids that may not share the same baseline get to that whole idea of self-regulation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess going back to the comment, I wouldn't, in my experience, agree that consequences and rewards don't work. I would agree in the sense that you can't just give someone something tangible and make them overcome their fear. If that's what that meant, I would agree with that. So sometimes I'll say, look, if someone, a child or adult, is afraid of getting a vaccination, and you say, I'll give you $50 if you get a needle today, someone with anxiety won't just say, oh, great, my anxiety's gone. You can't get your way out of fear that way. But in terms of you can't reward and consequence, there is a reward that is intrinsic that comes from achieving things. And so I've seen dozens, if not hundreds of kids now get better from breaking a very scary task down into smaller, manageable steps and exposing themselves to what they're afraid of in gradual doses and feeling that great feeling that comes from being brave. And the consequence of not doing those things is starting to feel sad over time, which is why anxiety and depression often go together. So I guess I would just want to clarify that individual's comment.
Yeah, maybe what I'll do is I'll give you an example, because I know I was on the phone with him the other day, and he's trying to get his daughter out for school, and she tends to be slow to wake up, and then there's kind of like a battle that goes on between the time that she wakes up and kind of gets out the door, right? Is the amount of time that she's preparing to get ready, not really kind of looking at the clock and understanding that being late there's a consequence or an issue to it, and of course it ends up creating friction between the two, and there is yelling as a result of it. So I mean, what kind of advice would you give in maybe a scenario like that?
Yeah, you're raising an interesting sort of subfield within mental health that we call school refusal behaviors, and it's really common. If people want to learn more, there's a great researcher by the name of Dr. Christopher Chorney in the U.S. who's studied this for a long time. And school refusal behaviors, like you're kind of describing without knowing more details, it can be due to anxiety and fear, so kids who are nervous about what's going to happen during the school day. But there are a good subset of kids who start to refuse school or dawdle or take their time or try to stay home. And it's not due specifically to anxiety. It can be due to wanting attention from their parents. It could be due to finding more fun things to do outside of school, like they might stay home that day and watch TV or, again, like spend time with their parents or friends. So it's a complicated topic to unpack, but there are some good resources out there for what's called school refusal behaviors.
That's great. Like, I had no idea that actually existed. That was incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
What other
it's
scenarios?
It's a huge problem, actually.
Yeah, interesting.
Wow. Yeah, and here's something that myself and quite a few parents that I know, because their children are around the same age, and it's in and around children's reaction to when they're not allowed to be on screens anymore. So no more if I say, okay, we've done enough Xbox today, or we've done enough YouTube, whatever it may be, the reactions that come out of children, and I know it's not my own because I've had these conversations with friends, and they just say, it's really from 0 to 100 in no time, that they're just so, like I say, devastated. My son is just, he can't believe that I'm taking the screen away. Like, how dare I, right? So I really am trying to look for the tools for them to deal with that disappointment, anger. It's really a number of emotions for them to see, it's okay, and they can do it again, just not right now.
Yeah. So talking about regulation in that context, we would be talking about frustration tolerance or managing, disappointment or anger. Really challenging topic for more and more parents today. And I mean, I think most of us might agree that the way these electronics, and they're not bad by themselves, but the way many of these things are designed, they're very addictive and rewarding, right? So whether it's a video game that you have to play longer to get better stuff, or YouTube videos where you can, go down a deep hole and watch for hours.
Yeah.
It's very almost designed to play to a kid's mind. Older folks, maybe I don't know how old you guys are, but maybe in our generation, MTV, right? They would talk about, it's fast, it's changing, it's quick.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you want to talk about how to approach these things from a regulation point of view, we want to break down the big topic. So how do we break kids away from screen time into smaller, manageable steps so that they can deal with smaller levels of disappointment over time? Mm-hmm. But in an ideal world, we can set up a situation early on where you might have what we call like a family media plan, where you would say, you know what, we're going to have 2 hours of electronics per day or whatever your family decides, and then trying to model as well family behaviors. So saying, you know what, after 8 p.m., the whole family will put away screens. Or if you're going to continue using, you'll watch them together, like you might watch a TV show together or whatever the case is. But learning to sort of put down those things for small doses at a time is sort of how you can help kids deal with that frustration.
You said something in the middle there that was really, I think, really valuable, which is the idea of, I call it kind of reactive parenting versus responding as a parent. And so reactive is you wait until the moment when the crisis is at its loudest. Everybody's braying, you're getting lots of red lights, all that sort of stuff are happening, and you're trying to manage it in that moment. And of course, when emotions flare, it can be a difficult thing. As you said, if somebody's screaming at you for 30 minutes, it's really hard to keep your wits about you. So the idea of, instead of reacting, it's responding. So you actually wait till the end of the situation, and then you take some time to think about it and think about what can we do proactively to avoid that kind of situation going forward. Do you see, I'm sure you recommend it, but do you see a lot of parents doing that?
Reacting harshly, you mean?
No, not reacting harshly, but just like saying, hey, listen, in the future, this is how we're going to kind of respond to it. Like, now that we've seen this scenario unfold, it's our kids, my daughter can't have the squishy that she wants at the mall, or the other one, wants to get on YouTube and that sort of stuff, and they know that they can't. Having a responsive approach to say, well, this is how we're going to handle this in the future. Like, do you see, are parents doing that?
Yeah, it's a huge range.
Right.
Some parents, for sure, might take that really proactive and responsible kind of approach. But I also really empathize with some parents who, don't think it's a big issue at the beginning, and then things just get busy, life gets in the way, and then the next thing you know, their kid is sleeping with their phone and refusing to turn it off all hours of the night. And I've seen kids, hurt themselves when parents try to take their phone away. So
Wow.
It's not about judging those parents. It's really just about, look, when you see those behaviors starting to shape up, can we, like you were saying, have a moment and say, like, for an example, maybe a kid who throws their controller through the TV, on their PlayStation. Maybe you want to sit down and say, well, that's not a great choice. Let's think about how we can prevent that from happening again. You can maybe earn back your console by playing for 15 minutes, at a time, and show me you can remain calm. If I hear you yell, or if I hear you smash the controller again, we're going to lose that privilege, because it's not a right, it's a privilege.
You've never played NHL 95, have you?
95.
I like to go.
As frustrating
No, they are.
as ever. But I mean, it's about learning how to balance that, right? It's a skill.
Dr. Chorney, do you want to share anything with us that you're working on right now? Anything that's going on in your world?
From a mental health point of view, you mean?
Sure. Anything you want to say, hey, you're writing a new book. Anything else going on in your space?
I have a minor plug in terms of I'm involved with a great national organization called Anxiety Canada. And in terms of regulation for anxiety, that would be a great website to check out. In terms of, there's a free app people can download called MindShift, and it talks kids through anxious situations. It gives them, ways to think about their fear and anxiety in different ways, like promoting, approaching, and not avoiding. And that whole website is built around evidence-based approaches to helping kids and parents manage anxiety, both the parental anxiety and kids themselves. So that would be a good thing if parents want to learn more about anxiety, which is a huge topic today.
I can't underscore enough the phrase you just used, which is evidence-based approach. There's way too much I think type parenting. That's kind of the thing that gets me to bristle a little bit. There is data that supports stuff. I know I was talking to somebody recently about sleep and the fact that, teenagers' sleep patterns are different than adults' sleep patterns. And they're like, they just got to go to bed earlier. And it's like, you're not listening to the evidence. So thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. In fact, thank you for everything that you share today. This is incredible insight into self-regulation. Again,
Super
I wish
helpful.
I wish we could talk to you the whole day, but
anytime. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. We have to go to break. You are listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk, Saga 960. It's Parents Canada Talk Radio, and we have learned how to self-regulate our emotions.
Yes.
Sometimes after every show, I always feel bad, but I also feel hopeful. How did you learn? What did you learn today? How do you feel?
Like bad, like, oh man, I should have done that the other day.
Yeah.
Got it. So, I mean, I've learned a lot of things. I've learned that radio is a lot of fun. So that's awesome. There were two things that I really enjoyed. I like the stoplight idea. Just being like, mom's at a red, guys. Where are you feeling? How do you feel right now? I think that really can put everybody on the same page and quickly, which is nice, right? Like, not like have to because sometimes kids, they're not going to tell you all of the things.
Sure.
But they can say, you know what, I'm feeling kind of yellow, might be red. And I think that's great. I also, I think that it's really important to be good guides, right? Like, are they seeing the behavior that we're expecting of them? Because if they're not, the likelihood of them just figuring it out at 4, 5, 6 is too much to ask. So are they seeing the behavior in me and knowing that I'm not perfect too, and that that's okay?
Right.
Yeah.
The 4, 5, 6 thing that you mentioned is actually really, really important, because the thing about self-regulation is it's not a home run. It doesn't be like one day you're like, hey, we're going to talk about our emotions, and then the next day you're an expert in emotions. This is a lifetime journey.
Yeah.
And so little tiny bits at a time. So that starting with that idea of being able to name your emotion or giving it a common vernacular like the green, the yellow, and the red is a really important thing. And I think we've avoided it so much as parents. Sometimes the thing about emotion, it seemed, you look younger than me, so I'm almost 50, and we never discussed emotion.
No.
Now when I talk to kids and they say, well, I was out on the playground and some kid, said something mean to me and that sort of stuff, and I felt bad about it. And, my response to that is good. Yeah. That's the real reason you're at school. You're not, yes, you'll get the reading, writing, arithmetic, but that sort of stuff can actually, we have other ways we can get that to you.
Yeah.
It's a social incubator.
I think we're, as parents and parents of younger children, I think when we haven't been through it a couple of times, I think we just don't want our kids to be sad. And we just don't want our kids to be disappointed. So sometimes we may coddle them so that they're not. And guess what? That's like not ideal and not the real world. And we don't want it to be hard all the time, but it's okay. Like if my son comes home and says, man, these kids were being mean to me today, you can say, that's crappy and I'm sorry, but what's going to happen tomorrow? Maybe play with kids that are nice to you and don't play with those kids, so that they know that you care, but that, okay, and now what? Right? Like now, what are we going to do about that? What do you think
the therapist line. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
What would you do differently? But I remember my daughter coming home from the bus the other day, and she said, the kids were over there and they were laughing and pointing at me and that sort of stuff. How does that make you feel? Right? And it's like, first getting that out there means that now you can actually have the conversation about what to do next. Because again, as parents, I think sometimes we jump directly to the whole tactical side of things. Let's fix it. Let's fix it. Let's fix it. I have a friend who, and this is where things get complicated, right? As a kid, she was constantly disappointed, right, by her parents, her family, and all that sort of stuff, her friends, that sort of thing. The road to adulthood was not a smooth one.
Got it.
And so now she has 4 kids, and one of the kind of underlying edicts is, she's never expressed it this way, but you can see in her actions, is the children will never be disappointed. And as a result of that can create some incredible friction.
Yeah.
And I think more importantly, it doesn't allow the kids kind of their growth. One of the kids that she has actually breaks down crying like whenever something happens.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity is how, this is the opportunity for you to say, I see you crying. I see that you're sad. You're going to have to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah.
As opposed to solving it by giving them the thing that they are crying about in the first place.
For sure. I mean, my kids are polar opposites. One is a crier, just as a crier, and that's how they deal with when they're disappointed. Sure. And the other is like straight face, like, nope, this isn't bothering me. I'm fine kind of thing.
I'm fine.
Right? And I mean, listen, these traits come from their parents. We know where they get it from. But each way is okay. If this is how you're going to deal with your disappointment, if crying it out is what makes you feel better in the moment, then cry it out. But then what are you going to do next?
Right.
What's happening after you become a robot and pretend you're not mad at me? Then what are you going to do in order to kind of move past this and make things work? The
thing is that on paper, all of this makes sense to someone like me. And then, of course, my son, he's 18, true introvert, goes off to university at Waterloo in engineering. So he's perfectly suited for the engineering. And Dad is freaked out. I mean, this is a kid who has resisted ever getting a job, has never had a bank account. I'm not sure he knows how to make a long distance call. And maybe that's on me. So immediately feel guilty, right? But you think, okay, he's going to have to. So, of course, he goes away and you're like, is he going to survive? First 2 months, he drops 20 pounds. He starts building a good friend. So you start feeling confident. And then the midterms come. And the midterms came. And again, this is a kid who's used to just excelling and getting the 90s sort of stuff. And those grades did not come back that way. Now, now for me it would have been like, I'll drive down, I'll fix everything, and that's.
Yep.
But what I did was I just stepped back, and it was hard, and I said, "So how do you feel?"
Yeah.
And I could hear it in his voice. He wouldn't say it. He wouldn't say he was disappointed. He goes, "I'm not really happy with the grades." And then I didn't. Then I just waited, and then he said, "And here's what I'm going to do about it." Perfect. And then I literally lifted my arms up and walked around the house.
Yep.
And we'll see how things go for finals. But that to me, that's the growth. That's the kid getting that self-regulation and understanding. I am responsible for my own actions, my own emotions, and I know exactly how I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah, I think as parents, it's like we just want to give them the tools, right? Like every day you hope that there was a lesson, how big or small, so that when you do release, right? Like when they do leave, you think, okay, how are they going to deal with this? I hope that they have the tool that they need.
But that's the key, right? Is you hope they have the tool, not I solved it for them, and that's the hard thing.
That's very hard.
We love to label the helicopter parents, but the truth is we all have moments of helicoptering.
Of course.
Even those of us who are like, I'm just going to take a hands-off, laissez-faire approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so I say this almost every show. If you're a parent, cut yourself a break.
You're doing amazing.
You're doing amazing.
Yeah.
You look amazing.
Yeah.
Even if you've just had a child and you haven't left the house for 6 weeks and you have something in your hair, you look amazing.
Great job.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, because it's dang hard.
Yeah, and then building these tools will help you get there.
Yeah.
That's going to wrap us for another week. We've got some really great shows coming up. I know we have one on not competitive parenting, but parents in kind of the competitive situations. Kids playing ice hockey and stuff like that. And you know the parents. I've got some stories of the hockey mom, but also the kind of the yelly ones on the bench.
Yeah.
Right? That sort of thing. I saw a
yelling
documentary.
At the kids, yelling at the refs, all the things.
Yeah. I saw a documentary on Mitch Marner, the guy who plays for the Leafs and that sort of stuff, and his dad like 8 or 9 years ago. Yeah, that is not a dad I wanted to have hanging around with me at the time, sort of thing. That said, his kid makes $12 million in the NHL right now, so maybe I don't know what the heck I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And with that, we are going to call that another edition of Parents Canada Talk Radio. Amy, thank you so much for coming to hang out. You were amazing.
This was super fun.
You're amazing. All right, tune in next week. Let's see, 11 to 12 on Wednesdays, Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960.